You are watching Eswatini TV, Sibuko Semaswati.
Sinvusele maswahla mahle ke sinvusele benkosi lenhle ke lapho khona ke umsakazo Eswatini TV ukanakise ke eRoyal Villa ezulwini lapho kunamsebenzi khona wenkampani lethunywa ke ngihulumende ukuthi ke ilawule ke demandla ekhaya ke Eswatini iEswatini Energy Regulatory Authority yathiwa kakhulu ke ukuthi ke nguESERA iestablishwa ke ngumthetho weEswatini Energy Act wangomnyaka wanga 2007. Kulo msebenzi walomuhla ke maswahla mahle inkampani iEswatini Energy Regulatory Authority ihlanganise ke stakeholders in the business community ngenhloso yokukhulumisa ke tindzaba tesicelo ke lesifakwe ke inkampani ye magesi ke ekhaya ke Eswatini iEswatini Electricity Company sicelo ke lesikhulumisa ukuthi le nkampani icela ke kunyusela gesi ngenzengo ke letsite eminyakeni ngelotako lekufanele ukuthi ke Eswatini Energy Regulatory Authority ayimemetele ke mhlalulunye ke enyangeni yendlovana eminyakeni ngelotako njengekusho ke kwawo nomthetho weEswatini Energy Regulatory Authority sicelo ke senkampani umthetho ke wasekhaya Eswatini iEnergy Act for 2007 ucela ke lenkampani noma ke leyo utility provider which in this case is Eswatini Energy Regulatory Authority ukuthi ifake isicelo sayo angakafiki ke noma ke by the 1st of November of each year lokwendekile ke inkampani isiyasifake leso sicelo ukuthi ke icela ke 7.36% bokunyuselwa ke gesi eminyakeni ngelotako njengoba ke sengibekile lokuthi kufanele ukuthi lokho kwendeke ke ngenyanga ke yamabasa eminyakeni ngelotako. So this is what happens on the 1st of February. EEC announces what the tariff increase will be like, and umthetho ke ucela ke Eswatini Energy Regulatory Authority ukuthi unikete consumers emalanga langa emashumi ke lasithupha, which is 2 months, ukuthi ke atilungiselele ukuthi ayemukele ke leyo nzengo ke lensha kungako ke bese ke seyiyaqala iba effective on the 1st of April 2021. Kunetingoni ke kufanele ke ukuthi tihanjwe maswahla mahle lokufaka ekhathi ke lokuthi kube nalama consultative workshops lakufaka ekhathi ke lena lesibona ke lo mohla njengoba ke siyati ukuthi ke labasebhizinisini ngiko ke labasebenzisa ke gesi kakhulu even nakangwane, and they are also classified as a customer that also subsidizes the domestic consumer. Lokusho ukuthi ke kunenzengo ke leyetfelwe ke ngemabhizinisi leyenda ukuthi gesi wakho wena ke losekhaya akwati ke ukushiphela ema business stakeholders or community have a concern, or of course concerns, which we are going to be finding out here today. The running order of this program is simple. EEC is going to be introduced. They will make a presentation, make their application known to the stakeholder, which is the business community, upon which completion they will be given an opportunity to interrogate that particular presentation. Sinabo ke bantu abakhulumisa lokufaka ekhathi ke CEO wayo ke nkampani iESERA Eswatini Energy Regulatory Authority babevusimuzi Mkhumane kumbuta nje imibuto lembalwa on behalf of our consumers and of course the business community itself. We will be able to talk to them, and we are also going to talk to EEC to find out some of the concerns and questions that you as a consumer may have, particularly among consumers like business community. We are ready to cross over and just to see exactly what is happening in the auditorium. CEO waka Eswatini Energy Regulatory Authority. But right now, let's just cross over to the auditorium to see how our program is looking like.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I take this opportunity to greet you all. My name is Kumbuzo Ngambule, representing the Eswatini Energy Regulatory Authority. We wish to thank you for joining us in this session today. We will also want to thank those that are joining us virtually in this important discussion. Probably before we get into the agenda of the day, may I humbly request Mr. Sabelo Dube, the General Manager Finance and Admin from ESERA to open the meeting with a word of prayer. Thank you.
Let's close our eyes and pray. Father in heaven, Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, we thank you, Lord, for your goodness in our lives. We thank you, Father, for the gift of life that you've given to each one of us. We thank you for your protection, our God, in the name of Jesus. Father, we invite you in this place. We pray for peace. We pray, Father, for your guidance. We pray for smooth deliberations in this meeting, oh God, in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you. The purpose of this meeting today, we are gathered because we have received an application from the utility, the Eswatini Electricity Company, for a tariff increase of an average of 7.16% for 2 financial years, beginning in April 2021 to 2022, end of March, then another year beginning in April 2022 to 2023. We, as an authority, have had consultations with various stakeholders that are affected by this price change, or that might be affected by this price change, and we are gathering various concerns and views pertaining the application. We made efforts to make the application as is accessible via our website, and I must say, we have been receiving comments and views from various stakeholders in different platforms, including our Facebook page. Today, my role is to guide the program for this day, and I'm not here alone, by the way. I am with ESERA team that will be paneling or coordinating the progress of the day. We have got on my left, it's the panel for the day. There is the chairperson who's going to be, when I move from this platform, he'll be taking over and coordinating all activities for this session. Our CEO, Mr. Vusumuzi Mkumane. Next to him, there is Mr. Simpiwe Kumalo, who is our regulation manager. Then on the next to Mr. Kumalo, there is Mr. Sabelo Dube, who is our general manager, finance and admin. The applicant, EEC, is also here, and they're making a presentation, elaborating and explaining the motivations behind the request for a tariff increase of 7.16%. My time is 16 past 10. We apologize for the delay. We're supposed to start at exactly 10 a.m., but we hope to be out of this place within 2 hours, which is latest 12:15. We should wrap up discussions for the day. We have tried to make sure that every table that is here has got a mic and a mic stand, so anyone that would request to make a comment, contribution in the deliberations for today will have to use the mic that is presented on that desk. Without wasting much of your time, allow me to hand over to the chairperson for the day, Mr. Vusumuzi Mkumane, to take over. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's session. I will be chairing the session for this morning, and as my colleague has already welcomed you, I also say the same. As a matter of fact, I would like to just bring in issues that authorize or empower the authority to run this session. I'll try to be fast and be brief. Basically, the tariff review is as a result of the Energy Regulatory Act of 2007, which amongst all other functions of the regulator, we have picked up the one that is relevant for this morning, which is to regulate and approve tariffs, prices, and charges and terms and conditions of services provided. So that is the key element or key function amongst others that the regulator has to do. Now, in doing that, we are also have to be cognizant of the Electricity Act, which stipulates how this issue of tariffs has to be looked at. Basically, it is to allow a licensee that operates efficiently to recover the full cost of its business activities, including a reasonable return on the capital invested. So basically, what this is saying is that any licensee that is in the books of ESERA, when they want to review a tariff, they have to bring the request to the regulator for the regulator to adjudicate on it. There are conditions, though, in that the licensee that is making a request is expected at all times to ensure efficiency in its provision of the services. And it has to ensure that it provides enough signals that relate to the efficient use of power and avoid undue discrimination between consumers and consumer categories. Now, just to confirm the fact that administratively the application is legally sound, is that it should be submitted to the authority on or before the 1st of November of each year, wherever there is need for a tariff review. In this particular case, we received the application before the 1st of November. And to that effect, it means, therefore, that the regulator has to adjudicate because they have complied with the regulation of ensuring that the application is received by the 1st of November. The regulator has got about 3 months to adjudicate, and the expectation is that by the 1st of November, the 1st of February of the following year, a decision must have been made. So basically the expectation is that on the 1st of February 2021, we should have completed all the processes, that is, the public hearings, the calculations, the consultations with all potential stakeholders, which I will quickly list below. This is to ensure that the customer has about 2 months to readjust themselves to ensure that they are ready to absorb or to adopt the decision that will have been made by the regulator regarding the tariff decision. Now, there are principles that we have to follow, which also are part and parcel of the legality of the execution of this particular task. I will refer to 3 particular entities or groupings that have to be considered as part of the principles. We have the customer, who in this particular case, most of you here are the customer. We have the utility, who in this particular case is the requesting entity. We have the government, which also has certain roles that it has to play in the whole sphere of our economic and social development. I'll just touch base on about two of each. From the customer perspective, the expectation is that the tariff should be affordable, meaning the utility should at all times look at the least cost of doing any of her activities. That is to ensure that we exclude any inefficiencies. That is critical, and the regulator has to ensure that. And on your side is also being vigilant enough to be able to assist, because both the management of the utility and the management of the regulator will not be in every corner of this country at any particular time to see and observe some of these issues. So, but basically, in the processes, it is to ensure that whatever the utility is doing to ensure affordability is to use the least cost option at all times. The other one that I would like to just mention here is that the customer is expecting a predictable and a stable tariff regime, meaning tariffs should not just be changed abruptly, because they affect your budgets, they affect your lifestyle, and so on. And at the same time, it has to be able to be forecastable to ensure that if you are looking from a business perspective, what does it say to you, and how do you need to structure and re-strategize your business to ensure the adoption of the particular tariff as it stands at that point in time. From the utility perspective, I will mention the cost reflectivity. The cost reflectivity, which I've already touched earlier, is that the utility is expected to deliver a good service, quality service, and be able to recover all the costs of providing that quality and good service to you as a customer. And above that, to ensure a return on their investment. This return is what the regulator has to kind of regulate and ensure it is reasonable and within the scope and within the means of their investment strategy, their assets, their funding element. In the implementation and transaction costs should be as low as possible. That is, whatever strategy, whatever projects, whatever activity that the utility has to do, it is expected that that has to bring in as low transaction costs as possible. So there is no luxury on that aspect. From the government perspective, we all know the government has got a number of social support programs. These have to be catered for, and the government has a role to play in terms of input into the tariff review from that social support perspective. However, there are two key issues that the government is imposing, which says the state-owned enterprises should be self-funding, meaning once you become a parastatal or a state-owned enterprise, you should be able to raise your own funding to ensure you execute the mandate to which you were formed for. So in this particular case, the utility is expected to deliver quality service, efficient service, safe service, but at the same time fund itself for all that. And that is why I referred to the cost-reflective tariff earlier on. The government, being a shareholder and a collector of revenue, is expecting that the utility should be able to pay taxes and when it be to provide or pay dividend. Remember, we mentioned that in the cost-reflective element, the licensee should be able to recover all potential costs of providing or delivering the service and earn a reasonable return on their investment. The government, being the investor and the sole shareholder of this particular licensee, is expecting the same like any investor. Having said this, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to recap on issues that took place sometime last year. You'll remember that last year we were with you doing exactly the same thing that we are doing today. And a decision was made on the 1st of November in terms of award to the applicant. And the applicant was communicated to with respect to that award, including the reasoning behind how that award was arrived at. However, we're all aware we were not expecting something called COVID-19. And that has affected not only our own country, but the world at large. Now, the situation then took a turn, and the situation became a desperate one, whereby, as I've indicated, the government also has got support, social support issues. The utility and the regulator were called in for a meeting to discuss the issue that was now prevalent in the country, which the government, as usual, being the leader and the governor, had to look at ways and means of how we can manage the prevalence of the pandemic. So the discussions basically followed, and the resolutions that came out were that the utility should forego the award that was done last year, and the regulator should allow the utility to resubmit. So basically, in those discussions, the final decision was that the utility should not go ahead with the implementation of the award, despite that it was a right that they had gotten legally, and the regulator in the discussions had to undertake to say, let's scrap what was resolved or adjudicated on and start all over again. So that is the reason we are here today, because the adjudication that took place last year did not take off because of COVID-19, and the utility is exercising her rights to restart the process per the agreement that, if need be, they will restart the process as if the last year one never came into being. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, the utility that is making a request, and per the tariff methodology, they are the ones that have to justify their request. And our role here is to listen to them and listen to your comments, and back in the office to review what has been said, the possibilities, and then agree and resolve what needs to be done. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, it was just a brief background to all of you. And at this juncture, I will invite the utility to come through and present the request that has been presented to us, which I hope the audience has visited our website, has visited the website of the utility to check what the propositions are, and to that effect to ensure that you can contribute meaningfully, having seen the request ahead of the presentation. With that, I thank you, and I will request the presenter to kick off with his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Mabonza. I work for EEC in the customer service division, currently heading that division. By way of introduction, by way of introduction, the team from EEC, we have perhaps if you may just show by your hand as I mention your name, because we are sitting in two different tables. In two different tables. There is Mr. Kaya Mavuso, who is the Marketing and Corporate Communications Manager. We have in our midst Ms. Drida Kamugisha, who's a Business Analyst. And then we also have Mr. Ernest Mkonda, General Manager, Research and Development, and also in Support Services as well. And we also then have Mr. Vusi Kama, who's the General Manager Operations. And we have Mr. Sabelo Ngambule, the Customer Services Manager. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity we have today to present our tariff application. We want to thank business for being here. We also want to thank all our other customers that are with us today, whether here present or at home. The application today, we have had a preview from our regulator. I think the first thing that we really want to say is that we continue to provide information transparently, and in this application we will try as much as possible to articulate those major drivers. As you will note, we only have about 30 to 40 minutes, so we are not going to go through everything as such, but we will try and deal with those aspects that are major drivers in terms of the application. We do want to say that electricity needs an electricity price path which will ensure that EEC and the industry remain financially viable and sustainable. And that is very important. It is absolutely important to have a stable and secure supply in order to support development now and in the future. Now that is very important, because when we speak to projects, we speak to projects that are, most of our projects, particularly the big projects, are long-term projects, 25 years, even 50 years, and so on. So we need, as a utility, as a country, to have a stable and secure supply of electricity to ensure that we drive economic development. And when you look at tariffs are the fairest and most efficient way to pay for electricity in order to ensure that the industry invests in infrastructure that is required to deliver the service. So those tariffs, those prices are the ones that are supposed to facilitate that investment in infrastructure in order to deliver the service. So now the regulator has indicated how prices must cover the full cost of production, and that in terms of setting tariffs, the regulator has always ensured that whilst the tariff increases are inevitable, but everyone must be carried along in our community. Hence, the reason why there is also part of the structure also includes an aspect that takes into account that we need to take care of the less privileged, and that there is quite equitable, particularly as far as when you look at our economy and Vision 2022, about how the development has to facilitate development not just of those that are able, but also those that are less privileged and less able to use this facility. And so, by way of just concluding that executive summary, we are always cognizant and we always look at issues of efficiency, and we do want to emphasize, even in this application, about how we have looked at those as well in terms of the projected tariff increase, and have managed to keep the application to a single-digit number. Hence, the proposed average price increase for the first year and the second year individually is 7.16% on the variable part of the tariff. Now, since today we are talking to business, the facility charge and your access charge, you're looking at an inflationary increase of about 4.4%, and the variable part, we're looking at 7.16%. So this is actually our tariff proposal that we are presenting to you today for the next 2 years. Now, it is also important for us, as we speak to this proposal, to indicate where we come from by way of background. I'm not going to talk to all these numbers here, but I will just highlight a few. The first number is about energy sales. The second number in gigawatt hours. The second number is on sales revenue in Amalangeni, which is about 2.3 billion. But I just do want to say something particularly around the local generation, which is 227 gigawatt hours, and the imported power, which was sitting at 1,109 gigawatt hours in the year up to March 2020. If you look at those numbers, you will note, and the costs associated with these numbers will show that indeed we still lean mostly on imports, and therefore the costs will show that indeed that's what happens. So the comparison between the two obviously shows that most of the power that we consume within the country is imported. The number of customers grew to 235,000, and the employees were sitting at 803, and contractors were also employed, and with the number of employees sitting at least 600. Now, if we were just to take you through the current year, what is happening in the current year? I do want to start off by talking about generation expansion. We have just emphasized about how we are generating about 227, at least that's what we generated in the last year, and it's quite low. So there is work being done about increasing our own local generation. We completed a feasibility study that was looking at whether or not we could generate more at Maguga, just below the current plant. So it actually confirmed that we can generate an additional 10 megawatts, and there is, as you go down, there is an additional 20 megawatts that we can generate. We are still looking forward to the additional generation below Makuduza. I think business will know that we have, as we go up Malapa.
Sise Royal Swazi sise Royal Villa sezulwini Maswati lamahle sinifusela kakhulu ke kulo msebenzi lapho khona ke sikhombisa ke eMaswati ikakhulukazi ke lawo ke la ku business community ukuthi ke inkampani isi lefake ke sicelo ke sekunyusela ke intengo yakhe sengalokuli ngaloko sikhombisa nengcenye ke ekhulwini 7.16% eminyakeni ke wanga 2021 22 na 2022 to 2023 ilapha ke ezulwini eRoyal Villa ibitwa ke inkampani yahulumende le icelwa ke ukuthi ilawule ke tindzaba temandla kuleli Eswatini Regulatory Authority kuthi ke itokhombisa ke bosomabhizinisi ukuthi yini lokwendela ukuthi ifake lesicelo basically to motivate and to present their case to the stakeholders njengoba ke sathi ke ukuthi i-business community ke cishe ngiyona ke le yethwele kakhulu ke eveni lakangwane njengoba sathi ukuthi bamsebenzisa kakhulu ke gesi and they are also subsidizing ama-domestic consumers. They may want to present their case also in terms of asking questions to the utility provider, which is why ke namuhla sila Royal Swazi Royal Villa ezulwini Maswati lamahle. James Mabunda is already in the podium making a presentation of their submissions to the stakeholders in terms of what they hope to achieve at the end of the day. Sitheke asihlale ke nababeke Vusimuzi Mkhumane lo Chief Executive Officer wake ke Eswatini Regulatory Authority lekuyinkampani lekayicelile uhulumende ukuthi lawuleke lokulawulwa kwemandla ekhaya ke Eswatini. They submitted their application to the regulator on the 1st of November 2020. Engabe kusho ukuthini lokho kuma stakeholders, and we do have a lot of other questions that you as a consumer and a stakeholder in particular in the business community you may want to ask. Babe Mkhumane angubingelele ngophethuba lekuvusela eMaswati.
Siyavuselana sivuselana wonke eMaswati labukele kulolo hlelo namuhla.
Yeah, kumeje baba Mkhumane kafishane lo mthetho uthi manje within 3 months of receiving an application ye utility provider yibani seni reviewile nende nema consultative meetings. Ungasichazela nje ukuthi ngabe kuhambe njani over the past 3 months? We are almost heading towards the end. I think there's one more stakeholder which you need to be visiting masisuka kulo msebenzi walamuhla, but how has the past 3 months been like in terms of the application ya EEC lekayifake on the 1st of November?
Kwanyalo kusehambe kahle ngoba kufuna uma sithole application sichecke ema-administrative compliance kuthi ifike ngesikhathi inako konke into lokuthingakalako. Sikucheckile sakhanza cha konke kusahamba kahle. Isitebhisi sesibili kuthi sikhulumise lamakhasimende ngoba imali lecelwa i-utility ibuya kumakhasimende. So ke kufuna amakhasimende athi ukuthi kunalesicelo sesiwadisile siyawakhulumisa ngeticheme tawo. Namhla sikhulumisa temabhizinisi kutawusala umgcibelo lesitabe sisenhlangano khona sikhulumisa ama-domestic nalabanye labangakhona kuvela kule minye imihlangano.
Of course, indzaba yekufaka kwesicelo babe Mkhumane in particular during this current economic period indzaba kumbele ngente kakhulu ukuthi mayifika nje kuma customers utility ifike ngekuthi hey impilo seyitaba likhulu kube eminyakeni lotako. What really is the necessity for the utility, whether the economic situation is good or bad, to put forward an application ku regulator ukuthi sicela kunyuselwa gesi?
Ngiko ke silethelwe utility kulama customers itoti khulumela ngoba ngibola baye babuke ukuthi bayayidzinga imali lenye noma cha. Bashilo ke nyalo ukuthi bakhuluma ukuthi kulomnyaka lo yabayitholanga i-tariff review nakulona ibese imiswa sicelo lesifakwe nguhulumende ekuthenini ake imayime ngoba kune lockdown yebantu kune lockdown yetinkampani, so sitawungena sidale umonakalo lomkhulu kanti tinkampani atikhiciti nebantu abekho emisebenzini. Kulo mhlangano ke ngoba sasesiphumile sijubo kulomnyaka ophelile by i-regulator mase kuhlangano kokwabukiswana ukuthi ngiphi best option. I-best option came up ukuthi cha ayibophe libhande utility. Isicelo sakulomnyaka lophelile sibukeke ukuthi asizange sendeke. If ibona ke ukuthi kukhona tindzingeko letitsite itawubuya. You'll remember ukuthi lesicelo salast year sasiminyaka lembili. So ke uma sekuvunyelwana etafuleni kwavunyelwana ukuthi ne-regulator ayicontribute in terms of kucegisa ngoba phela sesiku disaster mode, certain laws or acts la khona angacegicegisa. I-regulator agreed yavuma nayo ukuthi cha looking kuthi kuleti inkinga lesetikhona debantu labangekho emsebentini detinkampani letingasebenzi vele kungcono lesicelo lesa sisibeke eceleni in totality bangungene lesisha sicelo if kunesidingo ba exercise emalungelo abo-ke i-utility ukuthi cha nayi agreement thina siyasikhanza sidingo asimane saliwe etafuleni regulator ngokubuketa kwakhe.
Yeah. Bengithi nje ngedivert lenzaba ukuthi kumbe amaswati kakhulukazi lawo lasebhizinisini ataba nayo le argument ukuthi kufika i-request ye-tariff increase esikhathini lapho khona kube ne-COVID-19. But I think what you are saying is that bayithola i-award ye-tariff increase lebe kufanele ukuthi be effective on the 1st of April, which was set aside.
Which was set aside.
Of course. Now I think singena esigabeni lapho khona umuntu lobukela ngafisa lokuva lokuthi mangabe i-regulator noma kumbe i-utility provider ifaka le tariff increase yini lokuyileni yeni kubuke. I know ukuthi lo Electricity Act of 2007 ukhulumisa indzaba the principles of methodology which you apply when awarding the tariff. But what are some of those strategies or those methodologies? Because I know you have to apply at least maybe one or two or more of those types of methodologies. But request a 7.16% kulo mnyaka wa 2021, 22 to 23. But what is the principle that you will be applying to ensure that the tariff request yabo applies to the methodologies that you may seek to provide comfort to both the utility and the customers?
Well, the methodology basically has got about 3 stages. One is that the application must be legitimate and in compliance with the methodology, which they've done. The next stage is le mali labayicelago ibuya from the customer. So the customer has to be fully consulted. And that's why we have ran lama consultation meetings. Nyalo we are left with 1 after this one. Then from there, we have to go to the office. What we are looking at is there is a key element like for utility to comply with and convince a regulator on. Is an element of efficiency and application of low costs in any operation that they are doing. Now, sineke sekufuna ke nyalo sicwaninge onke ma projects laba wendile kuthi bawende at the best cost, which is the efficient economic cost. Then sibukete any inefficiencies labe akhona sekudlaphatiseka kwedini. That the public assists ngoba i-regulator ne-management ye-EEC, they are not everywhere at the same time. So the public can pick certain kudlaphatiseka or inefficiencies. They bring them in these public meetings. And if they bring them in public meetings, then it forces the regulator to zero down to the particular cost. Let's say umundu reports in the presentation, minebeti legami 4 times, but it kept on switching off. The question is, if they get there, how do they get there? They use vehicles. If they get there, what do they do? At times they are using overtime. Then we have to zero down to issues of overtime, issues of vehicle maintenance, and look at the relationship here to the revenues and to the fault clearance. So all these are issues of ensuring efficiency. We go further. Sibuget the procurement to ensure a class of this nature. Kwakuna supplier X at 10 rand, supplier B at 12, supplier 3 mhlamba at 15. Did you buy layer 15 noma layer 10? If you had to buy layer 15, what motivated you to do that? And if you find the motivation is not strong enough, we definitely will give you the price of 10, despite which you bought it at 15.
Yeah.
So those are the issues that we are looking at, which the methodology is trying to drive both to the utility and to the regulator to say, ensure that.
Yeah. Probably the question, especially in the era of COVID-19 and the scary thoughts in the minds of the consumer, in particular the business community, would say, aska awadwa ngalomnyaka wa 2020-2021, which was ultimately waived because of the situation. Angeke inbese de mali kumbe the cancellation of that award bese kumbe se increase kakhulu the tariff lena, you know. How are we protecting the consumers from making sure that would see there's already a deficit in terms of operational costs and things like that, because they were awarded but they still did not get to implement some of the projects? Yes.
Go to the formula that we have that speaks to the calculation of the tariff. There is always an adjustment element. You will remember when they are applying now, they are applying for 21-22. We are not there yet. It is also an application for 22-23. We are not there yet. So what happens is that once a full financial year has been completed, it gets audited. It will be audited against what was awarded, line by line. And then there has to be justification. Would see, Lena, you are out of budget. Len, what happened? Then if it's genuine that they were out of budget, there is something which we call under or over recovery. What then means is that Lena labor out of budget and is fully justified and convincing to the regulator, then it can be brought back to recover what was lost. But if the regulator finds, would see, you recovered more than what you were given, it is brought back as a deduction from the current application, which is a way of plowing back to the consumer because there was an over-recovery. If everything goes well, the utility should not exceed what it was given, because the profits that they have to generate or derive have to be restricted because of, call it a necessity of the product that they are providing to the public. Yeah. It should not be an open-ended profit venture.
Yeah. And probably the big question, and I was looking at the application in terms of their projections as well. The request is that they be awarded a 7.16% increase. Whereas when you look at electricity and its necessity in terms of anchoring the entire economy in the country, should be pegged to the consumer price index or the inflation, which I think in the year 2021-22 is 4.3. Inflation is 4.34%, and yet the request is 7.16%. And the following year, it is still far below the inflation, which is a 4.06%. You know, one would ask themselves, how does a utility provider request a tariff increase that far exceeds inflation? Because then this consumes or corrodes the disposable income of businesses and those of domestic consumers. You know, how do we handle that argument? Because ultimately one would say, the central bank iba involved to influence the tariff increase, or maybe a stakeholders such as those that do research in terms of what economic impacts this would make on the consumers domestically, or whether those are in business.
No, thank you for that, and it's a fact. Now, the situation that we're faced with is that currently we're importing about 80% of our power from outside the country. So the inflation that we're talking about now is inflation within Eswatini. The power that we have, if I may just give you an example, Eskom is going to be, and they've already been awarded, which is our major importation. They've been already awarded 10 percentage points to increase. And for exports, there is a 0.5%. So in essence, for AEC, they'll be paying 10.5%. Despite the fact that last year, when we set aside the decision, Eskom continued to increase its export power. So now, the inflation, yes, you are damn correct on that, but a lot of the power is coming from outside. Not only that, a number of the cables, the transformers, and all that, they don't come from Eswatini. They are imported, some in US dollars, and we have all seen the fluctuation of the US dollar. And we have all seen where some of these things are manufactured from, like the cables and so on. They are bringing in inflation from outside. I might sound like I'm defending the utility in that, but those are facts on the table in that we are importing a lot of power. The material that is being used by the utility is not from Eswatini. The only things that are from Eswatini are administrative things like stationery and so on and so forth, which, yes, we can control them from an inflationary standpoint, but the bulk of what puts power in your house does not come from Eswatini.
Yeah. And kunalendzaba yale mali lengu 119 million emalangeni, which I think the presentation classifies it as an over recovery. Bosomabhizinisi njengoba bahlangene namuhla batathi mabayibuka babe nalokuthi, but still this is a lot of money and it should provide some comfort, or it should ease the constraints on our side to pay such a high tariff request. You know, what is happening when you review the application, when you discover that there is an over 100 million emalangeni tariff, over recovery? How does that influence the award you give to the utility ultimately?
If there was not that over recovery, they would have been asking for maybe 8 or 9%. So that amount, because they made an over recovery in the previous years, whereby they got higher revenues than was expected, and they had savings in some of their costs, which resulted in the and that 119 is being deducted from the application as it stands right now. Otherwise, the request would have been maybe 8 or 9% if that over recovery was not there. So that over recovery, we are very, very observant when it comes to that, and we have to make sure that the money that belongs, because the whole money that is at EEC is a customer money, or maybe you could say it's government's money. So it has to be looked at, and any issues have to be brought into the table for discussion. Excuse me, please, and everybody knows that one, it has to be deducted without any means.
Mawulandzela emuva, EEC has been able to cap a tariff yabo to a single digit, which as it speaks at 7 point something. And in South Africa, for 2022-23, the projection is that the tariff increase, and they've already been awarded, is 15%. Are we heading to a situation where a tariff increase request from the utility provider will be above the single digit which we are currently seeing? And I think if that is the case, we need to find out the processes that consumers of electricity are being taken through in terms of preparing for this upcoming situation, especially if you look at what Eskom is doing in terms of their own tariffs.
The unfortunate part is that we also read, and currently there is a commission of inquiry going on in South Africa, where I would call it budlapa has been seen and has been blatant. Now, we are importing all those costs, despite which
As
they
well.
were as well.
Yeah.
Despite that, they were incurred inefficiently. The solution that we need is, at least if we could halve the power that we import, so that we can balance the inefficiencies that we import with efficiencies that we can control fully from the raw material to the final product. That should be the what we call the solution that we have. If we continue with the trend that we have, I can more or less say or predict very soon we'll be having double-digit tariff requests.
Yeah. And I'm glad there's already plans. If you look at some of the projects that were launched recently that speak
Yes.
to the long-term sustainability. Yeah. I see what the mobile communication industry is doing with regards to, I think this is now outside of what is happening here, attending to the needs of the business community, where they provide packages that speak to the social needs of the society. You find they create social packages, your social bundles and the likes, you know. And if you look at the needs of businesses and domestic consumers alike, is there a possibility of seeing the regulator adjusting the tariffs to meet social classes that cannot afford electricity the way certain classes of meet or pay for electricity? Could we see a social tariff for Bokoko, for instance, or for SMEs and the likes? Is there a possibility for something like that?
Oh yes, we are done with that. It's fully, it's ready for just a button. We have what we call lifeline tariff for the, call it indigent, struggling people. However, we have to know that as we provide that lower than needed tariff, somebody has to pay for it. And our plan, our program, which we call the subsidy framework, which will roll in this year together with the increase in April 1st, will be the introduction of the lifeline tariff and the introduction of a surcharge on the higher consumers, which will fund that lifeline. Because if I could give you an example, if we were to say the lifeline tariff is R1.50, right, and the tariff for everybody is supposed to be, say, R1.75, that difference has to be paid for by someone. So what we'll be doing is we'll be saying those that can afford, instead of paying R1.75, they should pay R1.80 or R1 something, which that difference extra that they are paying should go to subsidize the downtrodden. At the same time, we're trying to rationalize the issue of the business community subsidizing the domestic. So we are rebalancing the tariff to make sure that as the business community tariffs come down to their relevant cost reflectivity mode, so should the domestic. So as these come down, the domestic should be coming up, so that at the end we have an equitable situation. At the same time, what we will be doing in the near 2-3 months, we'll be running a big, call it power indaba, where we are bringing in everybody that is interested to contribute. We are seeing the domestic currently is subsidized by about 40%. But what is the real or the comfortable subsidy? Because you can never charge people on their cost reflectivity properly. Internationally, there is an element of subsidization. So we have to agree as a country. Do we want a 10% subsidization of the domestic, or 15 or 20? Which one can we be comfortable with? So we will be having a big conference to debate that, and we'll be projecting the numbers. If the subsidy is 15%, what does it mean? If it's 10, what does it mean? We'll be bringing in a sensitivity analysis presentation, and then we can agree. If we say 15, then we know we'll be moving from the 40% cross-subsidization to the 15, over what period, and what will be happening to the tariff. And then we will put that in motion. But the lifeline tariff is already a done deal. It just has to be introduced. The challenge with these is that they have to be introduced at the beginning of the year so that there are no disruptions. Remember, I said to the consumer, the tariff should be predictable and stable. So you can't just keep on jumping, like in the business community, they budget their according to. So you cannot then change midstream the game, the rules of the game.
Yeah, and my last question to you, Babem Kumar, is that we are speaking of the second wave of COVID-19, and we don't know what's going to happen. We've already seen EEC forego their award from the previous award, you know. And at the same time, you as a regulator have a responsibility to protect and to make sure that the utility is stable, because it speaks to the core needs of this economy. What will happen should you award EEC this tariff on the 1st of February, only to find that we see a second wave of COVID-19? Are we likely to see the same situation as we did the beginning of this year, where they had to forego this application? How are we going to handle a situation like that should COVID-19 second wave hit the country?
That would be a difficult situation. But what I can project would be, even if we've made an award, it might have to be reviewed, because if you look at it, it will have been a third year running without a award. So what then would mean is that it will create an under-recovery, and that under-recovery would have to be brought in at a certain point in time. And when it is brought in, it will shoot the tariff beyond
a single digit.
The single digit, which would be very, very difficult. So we would have to sit down and work out what can be done and how our business is recovering, and take a view at that point in time.
Yeah. Baba Mkhumane, thank you so much for joining us on this interview. Ubaba Vusumuzi Mkhumane aveta ke ikakhukati imibuto emibili kayiphendulile, ngicabanga ukuthi amaswata nemibuto ngayo indzaba ye inflation ukuthi why I tariff yenyuke yenge inflation, njengoba inflation yethu ikhulumisa bo 4% but I tariff it 7%, and the main reason he's saying is that we are importing 80% of our electricity in the Republic of South Africa ka Eskom. Lapho khona ke Eskom ma tariffs akhe vele sekavela kaqala ke ku 10% to 15% in the next 2 years. Lokusho ukuthi nanathi still in terms of being stable as a country to produce our own, and so that we don't import even the inefficiencies that come with the utility provider where we import our electricity. The program also
informs the increase in the cost of sales. We always have to be circumspect when looking at how we will generate. We just don't inflate those numbers willy-nilly. We have to look at what has happened in the past and project into the future about what we believe will happen, particularly when it comes to the rain, which helps us then conserve the water for purposes of generation. And we've also taken into account the fluctuations in foreign exchange rate. So these are definite drivers or indicators that we have taken into account in the application. And they are more like drivers that we don't really have control over. So in terms of our operating costs and depreciation, our budget is activity-based, which means we don't just take the previous year's numbers and increase by some rate of some sort. So we look at our activities and project based on the experience as to what we believe will happen. For those that can see the pictures, you will see on the right-hand side about how weather has played havoc with our infrastructure. Number two, the expansion of the network and increase of core business operational costs. As the network increases, and so do the costs. And for the simple reason that if you have a depot, then they have to travel longer distances. Then they have to deal with roads that are not very friendly. We also have the dredging exercise. Dredging, as in that we have a dam as you go towards Edwaleni, which which keeps water for generation. And we have noticed about how that dam has built silt and then reducing the quantity of water that we can keep in the dam. So the dredging exercise is about removing the sand and the silt so that we can increase the amount of water we keep in the dam. And issues around as you build more assets, you can expect that your depreciation will also increase. I have spoken about the dredging exercise and about how critical it is important for us to increase water storage capacity and maximize on peak generation. Very important. I spoke about generation and how it is important for us to keep as much water as possible in order to take advantage of the available water and therefore make sure that we generate during the peak time in order to reduce import costs. And also as the silt builds, it will also have an impact in terms of our generation plant down the stream at Dwaleni, etc. So we make sure that we remove this so that we also contain our maintenance costs. I've spoken about the Edwaleni to Stone Age line and about how it mitigates the risk of power blackout to the capital city and the western region of the country, and about those projects down Engandveni. I was excited when sitting in another meeting, they mentioned about how the dam at Engandveni is full, and that was quite exciting because we can now see that the projects are really coming up in that area. Other projects that are incorporated that we have to continue doing is the installation of underground cables around our cities, the installation of aerial bundling cables, and then the installation of firewalls and combi units to protect our infrastructure from the elements of weather or lightning, etc. We just took one incident of recklessness, of carelessness, maybe let me call it that. In your Nginamatolo area, people dig around the infrastructure. This is transmission infrastructure. And when you do that, when you do things like this, what then EEC has to do is to make sure that we do civil works around this, and this is a significant cost. And this cost, once again, is your cost, it is my cost, for as long as you are a consumer of electricity. So once again, we do want to say that your support in terms of making sure that things like this do not happen is very important. In this case, we are investigating. We want to make sure that the perpetrators will pay for the costs here, because otherwise everybody else will have to pay for somebody's carelessness. It looks like here they're digging this, whether it's sand or whatever it is that they're doing. Unfortunately, given that our infrastructure is, around the country, we, from time to time, unfortunately have some accidents. As you can see, which infrastructure we then have to replace. Okay, so people damaging the infrastructure.
I'm not saying it's intentional.
Sibuyela maswahla mahle la sikhanzeke kuhle ukuthi asibathole ke nabo ke basemagesini lekungibona ke bafakele isicelo sekuthi bacela ukunyusela intengo yagesi ngaloku sikhombisa nengcenye lencane ke ekhulwini lesingabita lesilumbi ukuthi ngu7.16% lokuthi uqala ke kuba effective eminyakeni lotako ke mangabe ke iregulator ibavumela on the 1st of April siyawuqala ke leso sicelo sabo ke sisebenze mangabe ke regulator asivumele njengoba lo mthetho we Electricity Act wa 2007 uthi akuthi ke ngamhla ka1 February regulator athi seke sive ukuthi uyayivuma in le request yalo 7.16% noma ke cha noma ke makabe sekaveta asho lokuthi cha ngibaniketa ke lokungaka bese ke uniketa ke lama consumers whether they are domestic consumers or the business consumers emalanga la ngemashumi ngelasithupha which is 2 months ukuthi atilungiselele kuseka ngaqala ke ayi apply leyo tariff leyo baka ACC sebavele ke bayendile bayachubeka kuyenda ke presentation yabo kodwa ke la ngihletekelana general manager operations khona ke Eswatini Electricity Company ngoba bevusa igama nje kumcocisa nekuva lokuthi ngitiplet nyeke tinsayele babhekene nato nekuthi bafike njani ku 7.16% and how the future looks like going forward, especially if you look at the amount of electricity we are importing from Eskom, who has a double digit tariff as we speak. Mpokana nguvusela ngophela thuba lekuvusela eMaswati.
Azivusele eMaswatini.
Siyabonga kakhulu Bhokane isimo lesiphila kiso semnotho singileso lesenta nje Maswati makeva kuthiwa sinkwa siyakhula tsawu nebakithi kukhula kupetrol wow nebakithi gesi ke yinfo vele live lelithi kuze ukuthi sifike esigabeni semavela athuthukile wonke umuntu akabe na gesi gesi engasuthi kungaba yinfo le affordable sibona ninkampani nifaka sicelo sekuthi nicela kwenyuselwa gesi ngaloku sikhombisa ekhulwini kuma nje ungachazela eMaswati background yale application ukuthi mangabe Maswati akhala ukuthi isimo semnotho sibi kodwa what happened in the boardroom that motivated you saying we are going to increase a tariff despite the current economic situation that the Maswati are experiencing, especially because of COVID-19?
Yeah. Kuqiniso John njengoba soyibekile ukuthi siyinkampani sibuketile ukuthi kungiso sikhathi lekufuna sale sicela vele ukuthi sibukete tindzaba tekhulisa ama tariffs. Tintfo lesiyesibukete ke leti motivator lokuthi sikhulisa ama tariffs tintfo letifaka ekhatsi ukuthi njengoba wadi ukuthi gesi si importer 80% walo electricity from South Africa, which is Eskom, and they've indicated ukuthi batawukhulisa bona ema tariffs abo to us nga 10% kusho siloku lishumi ekhulwini lokunye lesekubukete siyesibukete tindzaba tema operational cost nansi ke ma operational cost incumbi yaletinfo lesitithengako sithenga bomakhelwane letinye sithenga bo overseas njengoba ubona ke intengo ye-dollar nako konke kuyehla kwenyuka vele bese sekuyasidulela so kufuna sibukete ke ukuthi how do we cover lama cost lango lokuye ke lokuye bese sikendeka ngokuthi le network yethu njengoba nati i-network lese ikhulile ngidawubekisa nje nawubuka ema generation plants ethu lesinawo bodwaleni ale ku 1963 so vele seka ejile so kuyadzinga lokuthi sizame ukuthi simaintain le infrastructure kuze sitokhona sideliver lo gas eMaswatini nekuthi ke kufuna kube na some sort of a return lesiba nayo sitokhona sisi-investe more especially ndawubekisa nje ama-investments lafana nekuthi sesayakhile na i-10 megawatt solar plant kalavumisa siyathemba ukuthi itasisita siMaswati going forward ukuthi mitigate phela kulama tariffs lesinawo lokunye ke lesikubukile even though akukabi included into the tariff sibukile ukuthi kune thermal power plant lesibuke ukuthi ifuna yakhiwe and itawuthi ngathi imali leti sabalele leti kufika lekubo 12 billion nasti estimator so nawubuka tonke letinfo leto gezi ke njengoba usho vele umcoka ukuthi sibe naye eVenice Maswati even though ke njengoba bese ngishido John lokuthi bo makhelwane nendlela tinsengo letikhula ngayo lengaphandle bakhulumisa ema double digits siyahlala ke nathi siyinkampani bese sesiyabuka ukuthi asizame lokuthi le tariff singayendi ibe ngilenkulu kakhulu. That is why we have come up with a single digit nalokuthi ke kumcoka ukuthi maybe Maswati even though siyabona vele simo semnotho sibheke phansi akasibeketelele singadikhanzi sesithi maybe sesidinga increase in the future nangabe singakhulisi nje kusho ukuthi in the future le tariff increase itayake bese seyiba inkulu ngingabekisa nje Eskom sikhulumisa ukuthi utawukhulisa nga 10%. Lo 10% kune decision le bayi challenge enkantolo bayiwina le amount to about 69 billion lo 69 billion nangabe bamunile kusho ukuthi ifuna bachubeke bamrecover. What that means kusho ukuthi le tariff ya Eskom lefuna ayi apply to us or even to the South Africans nasi calculator ngahle kwendeke ibe ngu 20%. But the regulator in South Africa is actually challenging that decision. That is why we have not included that into the tariff application.
Yeah. At the same time, sikhuluma nemaswati lana bhokane especially letinye taletini for mathematical noma kumbe vele tifina ukuthi ube sesigabeni lesithile sekuconza ukuthi ibhizinisi isebenza ke kanjani. Ngiyeva lokuthi kumbe sokuqalile uyangena kiko. Emaswati athi hey Pires buta mbhokane lapho thina sithole 3% of cost of living adjustment. Bendelani lokuthi bona bese banyusa ngalo 7.16%. Akuvakali yini bangalinganisi nalele sikutfolile stokhona lokhu afforda because now this is expensive and lokunye lokusethwa as objectives for the customer ngo regulator ukuthi le tariff ayibe affordable but awuthi ke so yasidulisela nga 4% and I think this is just a layman's perspective but I think you will need to be able to motivate kuma customer enu lokuthi nifika kanjani vele siyeva nithi nibhadala 10% lena lokwanalokwa siye sinibonela na declare ama profits and all those kind of things. You should be able to cushion us. What is the motivation really for the 7.16% against what our inflation is and against what our cost of living adjustment was?
Njengoba sengishido John lesiyasibukete seyinkampani siyasibukete le mali letawudzinga ukuthi ikhona ukuthi le business ichubeke isustain sikhona ukuprovide a service to my customer. It's a very good question lokuthiwa nde comparison ukuthi emaswati ayabuka ukuthi cost of living maybe khule ngabo 3% ngiyabekisa but let's say factorisha into the tariff applications factorisha what you call inflation kula lamanye ama components ale tariff increase like kunema fixed components la bhadalwa business ngaphandle kwale component yale energy lo 7% which is an average to apply to the business to the energy component yale tariff. Now lo 7% njengoba bese ngishido udrive wangito letinfo lengitishoko letifaka khathi ukuthi ufuna sibhadale phela bomakhelwane ngawubekisa nje on average kuyo yonke imali lesikolekile siyambhadala la kubo on average 70 million sibhadale Eskom gezi lesithengile lo munye ke siyasimthenga in the region ku trading platform kule day ahead market maybe sengapota nje recently we are actually very lucky sesikhonile kuphindze si revive i-trading yethu na Mozambique lokwenda ke ukuthi le tariff iyazama lokuthi ikhushineke kona nathi singafisa ukuthi le tariff increase ingabi kule level lekuyo but lokumcuka ukuthi le nkampani ifuna ichubeke isustaineke kuze ukuthi amabhizinisi atokhona ukuthi achubeke akhicite even.
Yeah. Lokunye lokubuka i-regulator mbhokane indzaba yokuthi kwananayo le utility provider yethu ayingabe seseba affected it must remain stable because it provides a very important service to the economy of the country. My layman understanding is that if unicela i-tariff increase ya 7.16% kanti nithenga gas lapho khona sekuthiwa i-tariff yakhona ngo 10% isn't this going to affect you as a company kube kumbe singeva kusasa lokuthi kumbe inkampani isakhona ukudeliver kahle i-service? How are you balancing up these figures?
It's a very good question John. Ndawubekisa nje le ndlela lesibalance ngayo lama figures njengoba ngishido ukuthi 80% ologezi simthenga bomakhelwane eSouth Africa but ke lenye lomnye gezi siye simthole ku what we call it day ahead market. So we've got a trading platform lehleti eZimbabwe so whereby siyakhona ukuthi na ungena la ku trading platform ungamthenga gezi umthenga as far as DRC Congo ngiyabekisa la kangwane. So sibe nenhlanhla ke kule COVID situation ngesikhathi ama business more especially in South Africa avalile we managed to make ama savings sathenga gezi lomncane ka Eskom sasesithenga lomningi la kule day ahead market because lo gezi beka available so nangabe gezi are available lo cheaper we take advantage of the situation. That is why ke lama assumptions ethu azamile bese kushina lo 10% lesim assume from Eskom. That's how we then came up with lo 7%. But I think lokunye ubuta a very important question ukuthi inkampani ibonakala maybe yena nema profits bayibani bakhale ukuthi inkampani ngathi nema profits kanti phela we are supposed to be a service providing company, we are not supposed to be making profits. But maybe to answer that question nje kwaqala nje lama profits that we are actually making they also belong to the general public. So lama profits if inkampani i-overrecoverile the formula is such that uyayithatha le mali lo overrecover ngayo uyifake back into the tariff application ngiyo ke lebese sayiphinze kushina na le tariff increase ungatkhanzi ke le tariff increase seba inkulu kodwa ke nangabe kwentekile wakhanza ukuthi asengibekise regulator nanga siniketa i-tariff ibe less bese sekugcina sekungathi compromise le service, that will mean a higher increase for the customers in future. That is why it is important ukuthi sti apply sizame ukuthi le tariff application nasiyenda ibe equitable for all stakeholders nalokuthi ibe predictable for my business. That is why we end up applying not for 1 year but sizame ukuthi ifake le minyaka ibe mningana.
Yeah, it is a good thing that you had to forego the tariff that was awarded, which was supposed to be effective on the 1st of April. But you are meeting business, the business community here today, and they will say the year has been bad. If we start off the new year in 2021 with a new tariff, maybe during the course of the past year, which was affected by COVID-19, you are setting us back as businesses. Are you willing to compromise a reduced tariff, maybe because of your appreciation of trying to provide the comfort to business community? Because I think when the Q&A comes in there, this is the question that will come. You know, and if you were to do that, I think you need to also to motivate the fact that what will happen to you as a company if you were to reduce or afford a lower tariff than you have already requested.
Maybe it's a good question. Maybe angiqale la kule aspect ukuthi as a business we nakutholakala le tariff increase ukuthi ayisakhona ukukhula ibe what we actually asked for 5.7%. Regulator had actually given us 1.03%, but then nasekuhlangana onke ama stakeholders together with government due to the COVID situation, the tariff was actually zero. The moment the tariff becomes zero, we went back to the boardroom and we had to readjust certain things because nanati we were also affected by the COVID situation, in the sense that some customers, big customers, more especially the hospitality industry, they couldn't pay us anything. So that revenue was not actually coming in, which then meant a compromised service to other customers, because we also had to cut certain things. And once we've cut all those things, then it compromises the service to the business. But we have tried, despite all the challenges that are in the picture, to meet business halfway. That is why we're asking for 7.16% versus a bigger tariff increase, to try and meet business halfway. So that's to give them a quality service, and then because the economy, if we don't provide quality service as a company, the business gets affected. I'll make a simple example. Now with the new way of doing things, most people have gone virtual. It's important that we always have a continuous power supply. If you have got power cuts from now on an ongoing basis, it affects business. So we have to make sure that we give quality service to our customers.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming through on this interview.
Asbonga Steven, and thanks for the interview, and I'm hoping that business will also support EEC by allowing us to make that single-digit tariff increase, and hopefully stawubambisana umnotho welizwe uthuthuke. Thanks very much.
Siyabonga Bhokani. Ngovusa igama loyo singela ngekhathi ke maswahla manje sibuka ikakhulukathi ke imibuto sayivele ke iqalile. You do want to find out what the business people are saying, and as we have already discussed some of the concerns and the challenges that the utility itself is facing.
Ngivusele ngibonga kushemene, ngivusele indlu yonke, ngivusele Sera, ngivusele nabosomabhizinisi abagcwele endlini nasemagisini ngibavusela. I would like to voice my disappointment because when I made the call to make this appointment, I was told that Sarah can't go to Spofanene to take our submissions because Spofanene is not a town. Yet there are lots of sugarcane schemes there, pumping millions of emalangeni to SSC. I was very, very hurt. Very, very hurt. I've heard that SSC is giving us 57 units at Malangen. Maybe it would be wise for them to tell us how much do they get for 100 Malangen from Eskom. Because maybe they get 2,000 units, we don't know, and they give us a raw deal. Number two, I've heard Mr. talking about subsidizing of electricity to the domestic. How do you come to see if a person in domestic qualifies to be subsidized? Maybe I'm domestic, but I have billions of Emalangani. I can afford to buy electricity even at 5 rands per unit. And then I'm committing with a poor person, maybe who can't even raise 1,000 Emalang on a month. I'm being subsidized. How do you come about into knowing that? And then coming to stealing electricity, I think SSC knows the culprits.
Could you introduce yourself, sir?
Oh, damn it. I'm very sorry. Ngusiboniso Shongwe ngisuka Eswatini. In fact ngisuka kaMaphilingo. Eswatini inkundla yami. Ngiko ngifike lapha ngidiswe nje into ukuthi ngivile ukuthi Eswatini angeke sera akhone kuya. Ngase sense angishiyo umsebenzi ngide la. Ngingathi kusasa bangidecidela bantu basembabala. So kubuhlungu kakhulu kuthi gesi uyasidurela. Ngibonile kuveta lapha ukuthi SSC nyalo so plana ukuthi phehlela gesi lokuyingoma lekaza ayihlabela. I think bengisafunza a primary. Nyalo angisakwathi ngisone kubhala kaze esikoleni ngaphuma nyalo bathi elibhuku benda i-thermal project le engabe yona itawuletha ini because kukhala nge-ozone layer ukuthi engabe le thermal sithi isotha inkinga noma itawungeta inkinga mayitawugcina khona yona. Asesibone ke lapha ekwebeni kwagesi engabe SSC cause vele emakhalifithi uyawadi gesi nje mina angifundisanga angimadi gesi kuze kumebe ngitsinga electrician le SSC lam approve once ngabanja mina gesi ngimebile SSC uma angiphenya mina ukuthi ngisito ngibane kwa discover ukuthi ngibane 21 loyo lo sort vele luyaphila yini ukuthi luvimbela abanye ukuthi bangaganga. Lokunye ngibone lapha ukuthi kuthiwa nangabe ba overcollectile regulator uyabathethisa so siphela ba overcollector bangebele mina consumer imali bangebele direct. How do they bring the money direct to me? Bangasho ukuthi itawungena masibacela dicelo futhi next time bangebele ofithi ba project kabi imali lebe bangayidzinga. Kumbe ngine senda manje ukukhuluma thina sibathenga sibasebenzisi bagesi ukhona ni lahlala asibukele nje e-office ngaphandle kwa regulator ngoba mina nje just as umuntu wenkosi even balo regulator angimati kumbe engine nje ufaka ekhathi bano ba SSC ligama nje kuthi ngisera utimele we don't know. And then nokunye talking about a replacement of damaged infrastructure like besikhonyisa timota but tishayise ema transformer. Engabe such infrastructure SSC aga insuring ngane. Is it not insurable? Nabe ya insurer why bese logo kuba futhi ibedini yethu kan lomshwalense wane. Even mina nje angifunzanga but tamtimbadla ti insured angikhaleli umuntu tangilimalela. And then my profits, because the Pela SSC is a public entity. As the profit, nabe awatola, endua atala ebhange nje. Ngumbuto loyo lentibuta wona. Kumbe enginesengcina. Itolo kungangeni lohlelo lolu lokuthi gesi ngithenga lenginemali yakhe. Abekufika umuntu westududu ekhaya atofunza i-meter reading. SSC ende iphepha yakhe inqumbi amoshe imali angibhile. Konke lokho akusekho nyalo. Le mali leyo nyalo lesevako ibhekephi. You deserve to know konke lokho. And then angati kusengabe nakunyalo lenta kubuta ngabe kutangena lapha. Why is the need ukuthi nabe nje SSC ngicela gas ekhaya? Afike angifune maybe currently it was around bo 5,200 i-connection fee. Yande mali leyo. Kahle mina vele angiyadi yande mali leyo. And then why SSC angaveli alese gas ekhaya mahala? Because vele ndambhadara for life gas in Tanzania. Gas is not a luxury, it's a need. Okay, ngive athi umuntu lomdzala lapha nyalo there's even no need ukuthi ngihambe personally ngiye emagesini. Ngithenga ukuthi ngivele ngene ku website isi ngisho ukuthi ngifuna ini. Mina nje angifunzanga konke lokho angikwadi lokho yabo. Engabe ngidawuthi ngisicekele kanjani kenyalo nathi so njalo angene website angikwadi lokho angase ngibone ngiba nje baqoqa ngakho. Because I'm not required to go there physically. Ngicela kukhawula lokho. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you, Chairman. Ligama lami ngisipho Nkambule. I work for Eswatini Cane Growers Association, balimi bemoba. Ngitawuba nje nema comments la few nema suggestions bese ngiba nembuto. Mhlawumbe kulo mbuto as a preparation ngidawucela lo simane sivakashele section 5.10 of the application so that when I get there, the technical minded can refer and assist me understand it. One would like to commend Sarah for the way they have structured the hearings this time. I think they will make it more effective participation. And then commend EEC for the introduction of Quattro 8. We as growers have noticed that it makes life a little easier. And then mention that as growers of sugarcane and users of electricity, see, I saw like COVID, like everybody else. As businesses, we had geared our plans for an approximately 1% increase for this year we're in and next year. And now COVID has opened an opportunity to front load the costs. And then on the suggestion side, growers would like to reiterate a suggestion that we create an enabling environment for consumers to also assist the utility in terms of producing energy, especially in terms of renewable energy. Some users can afford some small solar plants, but the problem arises in that there's still the problem with the wheeling of the power as well as net metering. So as a suggestion, maybe that needs to be fast-tracked so that we all play our roles in this electricity sphere. And one other area that has been suggested before and would like to suggest again is promote the efficiencies that we have talked about. Particularly growers of irrigated sugarcane, there is something called, I hope I'm using the right term here, access charge. Lokulothi ungakushaya bese kushishimba nawe for 12 months, regardless ukuthi lesono usende kangaphi kulo 12 months. There is a strong suggestion that we should look at reducing the period from the 12 months to something more affordable and reasonable. The problem here is that as long as you have got the 12 months duration, then you have a problem taking advantage of the time of use, which would have assisted everybody to work within the capacity. And then coming to the technical question, I just need assistance here. I think the chairman spoke about the need for the utility to be efficient, and Mr. Bunza also belabored that point. In section 5.10, there is mention that in a properly designed or running plant, the distribution efficiency is supposed to be between 7 and 9%. And then if you go to 5.10.2, the distribution losses that are considered are 9.5, which is outside what is said to be normal. I'm just requesting that we as farmers be educated on the reasons why we consider the distribution losses to be outside of the normal 7.7 to 9 range, if I understand that correctly. Thank you very much, Chair.
Oh, okay.
Ngibonge Mr. Chair. Ligama lami ngicela nimathenjwa service provider. Lozo sihlwaleni kune slot lo sivedelwe ngu-EEC. Bekukhulunywa ngama expectations. Sifunzeka sithi SSC encourages efficient use of power, which is it's a good initiative, but I feel like again enough because usita ema domestic users in terms of switch off your geyser, your swimming pools and so forth. Agafigi with those customers like with time of use. I've actually met some of the clients in Beksangala, Balimashugel. They are running motors of 90 kilowatt each. Ngiyiphi initiative SSC lasitalo mlimi lokuthi
amtshengisa indlela yokuseva lo gas. Most of those motors, there are no VSDs installed, no power factor corrections installed. So of which maximum demand yakhe irana haphazardly such that utawugcina bhatala penalties for the next 12 months. Power la 70 before ngekuthi kude measures la khona in place. Angathi lokuthi ngabe angabasita kanjani on that aspect ukuthi party ukuthi yini labangayifaka kuze bangatikhanzi banetindleko letisetulu. Ngaguess la umoshakele bangawusebenzisi. Ngiyabonga chair.
There's a hand from Zoom. May you have the question?
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me from that side. My name is Ayanda Ziane. I come from Eswatini Competition Commission, representing the Consumer Protection Department. And I'd like to firstly thank you, Isera, for organizing this meeting for us to hear the presentation from ECC. As an organization that is primarily focused on ensuring fair competition in the country, but also ensuring consumer welfare. We are concerned about issues of unfair conduct in the market. Most of the time you find that these issues, they do not get the light of day because they are not necessarily brought about either because of ignorance of some of our stakeholders, particularly our consumers, or maybe because the culture of consumer welfare in our country as yet is not necessarily pro-consumer. So I note that Isera does have a tribunal, and I believe in that tribunal there has to be an adjudicative process wherein some of conduct may be dealt with. So I'm interested in finding out, because we do have our own legislation meant to enforce consumer welfare, and we also have an adjudicative process. I'm just interested from Isera what their definition of a consumer is. Does it mean the same thing as a customer? Secondly, I would like to know if the tribunal is functional and what kinds of cases would come before the tribunal should there be any complaints. The reason why I'm asking about this is because we want to ensure holistic enforcement of consumer rights, even the ones that are sector specific and potentially much more technical than ordinary consumer issues. So it is very important for us to understand the level of protection for consumers. Yes, we appreciate this initiative because it provides information for consumers and traders out there, but we also want to ensure that moving forward, whatever conduct that happens between the trader and the consumer is maintained at a standard wherein the consumer is considered a valid stakeholder. So I'd just appreciate clarity on those issues. Thank you.
Thank you to all those that have made comments, questions, or thank yous. 2 questions have been posed, basically, or two direct organizations. One has been posed to the regulator, or a couple, and a couple have been posed to the requester, which is EEC. I'm not sure who is ready first. Is the regulator ready? Okay, you ready?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to answer Babeshongwe's question with regards to SERA not holding public hearings in Spofaneni. I think, Babeshongwe, we must appreciate that as much as the regulator would like to visit every single town every single time when we do public hearings in the country, there is certain limitations, especially with regards to time, that we have to review the tariff. That doesn't allow us that. But we do attempt to try and reach as many customers as possible, and also open up the forums through which customers can make their submissions to the regulator. I think our consumer manager was still to announce that customers are welcome to submit any questions that they have to the applicant and any other submissions that they'd like to make with regards to the tariff application to the regulator up until I think the 10th of January 2021, and the regulator will then take these inputs and submissions into consideration during the review, and also ensure that should there be any questions and clarifications to the applicant, ensure that these are answered and addressed before the regulator makes the decision. Now, how we normally conduct the public hearings is that we identify areas in the different regions of Eswatini. We always ensure that we cover the different regions every time we undertake these public hearings. But like I said, we can't cover every single town. But what we do is every time we do a public hearing, we attempt to rotate the towns so that we can reach other customers that were not able to attend the previous hearings. I believe we have been to Spofaneni before, but this time we were not able to, but we did go to Lavomisa, and we have been to Sitegi, which are the closest ones to Spofaneni. But we are also still to go to Nhlangano. We've been to Pixpeak, and obviously Manzini. So we do try to cover as many towns as possible, and try and rotate them every time we do public hearings. So it is not true that we discriminate any particular area because of whatever status that might be. We try to encourage and in fact go to as many electricity customers as possible. Thank you.
Siyabonga, I'll answer the question on the tribunal. First of all, maybe one would want to say thank you, our Competitions Commission, for joining us virtually in this meeting. And we do understand as a regulator that issues of the energy sector and the competitions, they go hand in hand, and you will understand, or you will recall that the regulator and the Competitions Commission, they do have complementary responsibilities, and in that way we have tried in the past to ensure that competitions issues are integrated in our work as a regulator. Maybe on the issue of the tribunal, yes, the Act provides that the minister shall establish a tribunal that will adjudicate on unresolved disputes, in the energy sector. But as at yet, that tribunal has not been established for various reasons. I guess one of the reasons is that it is a structure that requires to be funded, and it is it is a structure that requires to be funded, and as yet we have not had issues that probably would require to be taken to that structure. Maybe as we move along and the sector gets informed and up to date about these issues, probably I think it would be time that the minister considers establishing a tribunal as provided for in the Act. I'm sure the chairperson may wish to say something again on this, but that's probably what the response that we can have to that question. Maybe on the question of the customer, I don't know whether it was a question or I would want to give it to the consumer manager to take that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dube. Through you, Chair. The question, I think it's from Ayanda Ziane. Is a consumer the same as a customer in the context of the regulator? To respond to that question, one would have to state that when we speak of a customer, we are speaking of the number of people that reflect or appear on EEC network as meter owners. Those are customers. But when we speak of a consumer, we speak of anyone that is affected or impacted by, I would say, for instance, a price movement, as well as service delivery levels from the service provider. And in terms of ensuring that consumers are protected, there already are standards that every licensed entity is expected to comply on, and the role of the regulator is to ensure that those licensed entities are compliant. Probably one of the issues that we try and I would say exercise consumer protection is the escalation of unresolved disputes between the service provider and consumers. There is a process in place where consumers are allowed to escalate unresolved disputes. That is, those disputes may range from issues of billing issues, issues of service, issues of service interruption, and all that. There are quite a number of issues that we cover within that spectrum. So to answer your question, yes, there is a difference between people that we call customers. It's those that are directly, say, reflecting on the system as people owning meters. Then consumers is anyone that is affected. In a household, for instance, the household, the family household, the members become consumers because when there's no electricity, they are affected. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Mr. Dube has answered the issue of a tribunal well. It's the preserve of the minister. However, it comes through once, say, there is a dispute whereby the regulator is not in a position to resolve that matter, and somehow it affects, or it is unclear of, but given the fact that Consumer Competition Commission is an organization within the country, I don't see a barrier in terms of engaging ESERA to discuss issues of the consumer, whatever, or the customer, in terms of their legislative mandate. I think the regulator is done, and I think I can ask the utility to respond to the questions that have been raised. Thank you.
One, two. Thank you, Chair. We will attempt to respond to the questions raised, some of which sounded like concerns. One of the questions says, how many units does EEC get from Eskom? The easiest way of calculating how many units we get from in terms of cost of sales, because I think the question is essentially saying, based on your cost of sales, how many units do you get per unit? And so if you go to our website, okay, this year's annual report is not uploaded yet, but if you go to our website, you can look at our cost of sales and then the number of units, and then you will determine what the cost of sale per unit is. So that's the easiest way, because it's better to look at the cost of sale, not necessarily Eskom, notwithstanding that that's the major supplier. So if you do that, then you will know what the cost of sale is per unit. It is available for public consumption. How do we identify, how do we know the person that is subsidized?
Just a quick one. A question.
Utawusho na abe ngiyakukhulumela but I think uthe EEC 400 emalangeni nyalo sithola malini, I mean 400 emalangeni sithola 57 point something units. Umbuto wakho we uthe for EEC 400 emalangeni uthola mangaki emayunits, angathi noma ngikhulumela kahle. Okay, and then the other issue lo ishito wokuthi uthe ngive uthi wena awufunzanga kweyapi, and angathi isimanje ukhuluma ukuthi kufuna uye ku website uyohlola khona, maybe mhlambe angakuclarify lokho. I'm not sure what's where at the website, nabo website and everything, you know. Mhlambe ngithan clarify nje lokho, you know. Lo mbuto, but basically ngikhuluma ngalo mbuto lotse 400 emalangeni you get 57 units, 57 point something units when a ul customer. How much does how many units does EEC gets from us from Eskom 400 emalangeni? That was the question.
All right. Kusho ukuthi angichaze kanjena.
uma umbuto uthi silithenga ngamalini li-unit lilinye silithenga ka-Eskom, kokucala asithengi Eskom kuphela. Now ngiko ngithi ke uma ufuna kubona lokuthi sithenga ngamalini li-unit lilinye, ubuka le cost of sale. Le cost of sale isho lokuthi lo lokuthengisile ukuthenge ngamalini. Kuta kulo mbuto waka Eskom sine bilateral agreement now onke ama independent power producers. Le bilateral agreement ayivumi ukuthi sitawufika sithi la mhlanganweni Eskom usithengisele gezi ili-unit lilinye ngemali lengaka. Nabo bonke labanye labangema laba supply yakho. So ngiko lokuthi siphendule kube lula lokuthi sithi mane lokhu lesikhuluma ngako kukhulu lokuthi sitakuthini nyalo nangabe sitawuphendulela kuthenini uthi umnaketha akafunzi yena. Mhlawumbe lesingakwenda ukuthi singabuka le annual report yalomnyaka lophelile uma singabonana nasicetha umhlangano sitobe sesiyamkhombisa lokuthi ngoba lokuthi singakubala kanjani ngoba lokho kutowenda lokuthi lo mbuto wethu ungabi impendulo yanamhla kuphela kube impendulo naye kusasa as well. Ngicabanga ukuthi kumbe kukwenda kanjalo singamkhombisa inombolo ngoba ngicabanga ukuthi noma ngingafunzi udokhanza athi mhlawumbe bo divide nabo multiply nabo plus nabo minus kumbe udokhanza uyababona noma asangacela lomunye ke ambalele nakusasa. Ngiko lokuthi sithanze kuphendula ngaleyo ndlela leyo ngoba ungabuka Eskom kuphela ungeke wabuke onke lama cost of sales. Umbona njani lo muntu lo subsidized noma lo subsidizako? Kusho ukuthi lapha lo lokwendako ngilokuthi wenda luhlolo lwekwekuthi kubita kanganani ku-deliver gezi ekhaya, u-deliver gezi ebusinessini, u-deliver gezi kulama customer lehlukene kuthiwa i-cost of supply study. Le cost of supply study inetigatshana letehlukene and kunema methodologies lehlukene ekuyenda le cost of supply study. So in terms of the cost of supply study lesayenda ngiyo lena leyakhombisa ukuthi lo domestic customer yena ubhadala kancane kunale mali ekufuthi ngabe uyayibhadala. So lo hlolo losalwenda athi nemagezi kulabo bebakhona njengebosomabhizinisi ndawo kwathi ukuthi regulator naye walwenda nanathi samenywa kulomhlangano loyo lebe ukhona ema-office aka-regulator ngisakhumbula noma nge-2018 yini lapho regulator bapresenta nama-consultants apresenta akhombisa lokuthi vele kubita kanganani. Baphindze benta nalolunye lihlolo benta ngilabanye I think bekuthiwa nge-ECA nakhona kwaconfirma lokho. So umbuto lothi ubona ngani wenda lihlolo because lama components ale supply to the various categories ema custom kwehlukene kusuka ka generation kuthi ka transmission ka distribution kube nema operational operating costs etc. So you look at onke lokho bese and then you determine ukuthi kungimalini lokhu deliver gezi to the various categories ema custom. So ngilendlela leyo ke lokunye kwakhona ke kutaba likhulu ukuthi sidakuthini ke ngoba vele phela ngiyona ndlela kwendeka ngalo kwendiwa ngayo lokho. Wendiwani umuntu nangabe ebegezi kusho ukuthi angiqale emuva kancane ngithi uma ngabe umuntu umkhanza eba noma wathi lothi webegezi noma uyamsola bayaye basincinte indlebe. They usually inform us ma-whistleblowers thina asimbatsheli labantu ukuthi sitshelwe ngibani but sita la kule installation sitobuka ukuthi vele kwentekile ilokho nasikhanza ukuthi kwentekile and then bese sibuka lokuthi siya calculate ukuthi how much electricity did we lose bese siyakucharge ke based on lo electricity lesimlahlekele over the many years that you have been stealing the electricity, number one, and number two bese kuba khona I penalty yeke ukuthi wena beweba gas. So that's what we do. Kulo whistleblower ke na bese simbhadala 1000 emalangeni currently yeke ukuthi usikhombisile lesigebengu leseba gas. So that's what we do. Uma ngabe le mali nangabe thina se regulator abesinike ukuthi ke I allowed revenue lefuna niyithole ingaka, and then thina bese sikoleka more la kulama customer. Le methodology ngiyo lelethi uma ngabe sesikoleke more noma lengetulu kwalena lebesivunyelwe yona, lena lengetulu ufuna ukuthi nase sicela eminyakeni lolandzelako bese siyayikhipha yona njengaloko njena lapha besikhuluma ngalo 119 million. So le methodology ayisho ukuthi ay kukhona ukusho kahle lokuthi uboya lapha kusiboniso shongo noma uye lapha ku James Mabunza uyomnika nangiyazuka wakhe uyomnika nangiya 10 cents wakhe and so on, because kusuke le mali lena ibuya kuwo onke lama customer collectively, and therefore collectively bese iphinze ijikiswa kanjalo. So that's what happens. I think bekunembuto ngathi noma regulator uphendulile nesumbuto ukuthi ngibani lo ngimele mneka esera. I think there was a question le kanjalo. Why not insure lama assets nangabe ma assets noma shayiswa imoto njengaloku Ashito babeshongwe. Okay, so uma ngabe siya insurish labaningi bethu njengabo somabhizinisi sinema assets lesinawo, nangabe ungaclaim lema premiums akho abangcono over the years bese aba discounted, nangabe uyaclaim abese ayakhula lama insurance premiums lawa atawubhadalwa ngibani, lokho kuba ngilengcenye lama operating costs. So whether si insurish noma sika insurish, it becomes part of that. But the question ukuthi insurance ikhona noma ayikho. Sinayo insurance kodwa siyafuna lokuthi labantu labalimata le infrastructure bagcine babhadale. Uma ngabe ke ukhanza ukuthi akakhona kalokubhadala vele kuba ngona letindleko legcine tithelwe ngiyo le utility. But ngicela ukugcizela ukuthi ama premiums abhadala ngiyo le nkampani, ama insurance premiums. So we cost, whichever way you looking at it, kube beku ideal bese ngathi njena infrastructure yenu ma customer ethu ayilimali bese ngasho njalo. But lento leyo ngeke isibe liqiniso. It's not, because it happens, and I think it happens all over. Ngaphandle nangatsala infrastructure ifake la ngephasi lokuzaneni la ngephasi underground nakhona sebangayigubha ngemali lokuzana bangakhanya sibayilimata na sebagubha ngemapiki. EEC uwenda lama profit lawatholako. Kusho ukuthi ke lama lendlela abala ngayo lama profits wekuthi atobhadala laba invest noma laba fake imali yabo la emagesini. So bobani laba fake imali yabo emagesini, whether ngema loans noma equity, kusho ukuthi ngiloyo lo who owns the business nangaba tawu decide athi khona lokunqala kufuna ukuthi out of lama profits akho ukulethe ngala which means ngiyona leyo investment le. So that is why ibalwa based on le weighted average cost of capital. Lengifuna kodwa ukuthi nginike isiqiniseko kuko ngilokuthi iprofit lekhona emagesini ijinge ibhadalele yona lemisebenzi lemikhulu lesikhuluma ngayo kude lenye indlela la iyakhona naloko lengisanza ukuchaza ukuthi ema issues of costs la related to ema loans and issues of dividends nangabe kutsadzingekile aba catered for kanjalo.
Sise Royal Villa ezulwini maswahla mahle lapho khona umsakazo Eswatini TV usakata ke umsebenzi welibandla lelibuke kulawula ke tindzaba temandla namakethe agesi ekhaya ke Eswatini Eswatini Energy Regulatory Authority lekunyatwa ngumthetho ukuthi ke ibukele ke emakhasimende etindzabeni ukuthi ke gesi ke usebenza ke kanjani ephindze ke ibuke netindzaba ukuthi laba bona labaphehla lamandla bawaphehla bese bawa distributor noma bawathengise kanjani nokuthi nalabo bakwadi ke kuqhubeka basimame kule industry njengoba ke gesi sivala ukuthi sibona futhi ukuthi uyingcenyeke lenkulu yekusimama ke kwemnotho welivela kangwane kunengilokwendekile la maswahla amahle sithola ke lithuba earlier on sakhulumisana ke na Chief Executive Officer wayo ke inkampani Eswatini Regulatory Authority kumbuta imibuto lethide lene amakhasimende agesi kakhulu kathi lawo lasebhizinisini lebese khola ke lokuthi anemibuto lefaka ekhathi indzaba dabo inflation against the tariff being requested by the utility provider netindzaba ukuthi ingazothi ke khona lana kulese bakubita ngesilumbi ukuthi i-lifeline tariff lokutawu ukhona lokuthi ke ku-accommodate labo labangazothi ke abekho ke esigabeni sekubhadala ke gesi njengalabo kumbe elikhikhi labo ke lelinconywana hlethi ke nasikhumbuzo nkambule la longo communications manager kuva nje ukuthi umsebenzi uhambe njani nekuthi ke going forward kubhekwa kuphi njengoba maningi ama stakeholders lekufuna ukuthi aqhubeke kakhulunyiswe and when are we likely to see the regulator award the tariff or announce what tariff has been awarded to the utility as per their request nkambule ngikubingelele mnethu ngiphethe ubale kufusele emaswati
susele Mr. Perez susele nababukele emakhaya. Thank you for this opportunity.
Siyabonga kakhulu mnethu ngumsebenzi lengikatha ukavami lona if you look at the fact ukuthi sikhathi nyalo ngo12 asisakatela emaswati kakhulu kathi laba businessini. We are also on YouTube. I think the intention is to make sure ukuthi bantu bayadi as much as possible ngetindzaba ukuthi i-tariff lecelwe utility ihamba kanjani. But in a nutshell, umsebenzi uqala I think 2 hours ago ungasichazela nje ukuthi kuhambe njani, what were the submissions made by EC and what were some of the submissions or concerns raised by the business community.
Sibonge Mr. Perez. Mhlawumbe kugcizelela lo lokuvetayo ukuthi umsebenzi lo ngavami alomadima lona sibukile sabona ukuthi sive singeke sikhone ukuthi sonke besingaphuma emakhaya siye emihlanganweni enjengalena ikakhulu considering ukuthi isikhathi esiphilekiswe kune default elifana nabo COVID letingazumeli ukuthi sikhone kuba nemihlangano lengaba successful. Sizamile indlela ukuthi bani bakhone ukusijoyina ngendlela ehlukene virtually nakhona bo YouTube bayilandzelele le session. Lokuhle lokuvelayo lana ema business asayibuta imibuto nge-application ya EC but ke lokufike kuvele kahle lencane bekuso lokungaveli kulamanye ema-sessions tindzaba tekuvikelwa kwe-consumer i-consumer protection kusinika insayana nathi kumlawuli lokuthi mhlawumbe sikubukete kabanti yet yebo siyakwenda ngendlela ehlukene ngibekise indzaba uma ama-customer qabene bemagesi bangevani ngandlela dithi siyafike singene sibe ngumlawuli walabantu bakho umlamuli wabantu labo kodwa ke nasetindzabeni the price leliso lekuthi leli customer nalo libuketelwe sibona kuyinvo le mhlawumbe insayele kumele siyi-apply sisaqhubeka sibuketa lesicelo lesi.
Ngike ngangena lapha nkambule emehlo amakabi ngilajabulako ngizama kubuka lokuthi ingabe represented kangakanani business community. I don't know if it was by way of you not inviting the likes of business Eswatini, your first big and other stakeholders, especially those that are major utilizers of power in the country. Were they aware of this meeting? Because I suppose their input was going to make a big difference in this meeting.
Ngibonge Mr. Perez. Business Eswatini ukona represented and they are part of people that you invited for this kind of sessions. Mhlawumbe one would say lokuhle ukuthi as we engage bayaveta lokuthi some of the submissions asatawungena through emails angibekise nje labanye bacelela ukuthi it's okay that we have extended to the 10th ukuthi bani bacweba balisa ama submissions asatawungena and uyasikhutsata ukuthi lamanye avele after lama sessions because basuke sebayive kangcono lesicelo presentation seyichazekile lapho kunedinge ngabe bangefa khona sebayakhona ti applyer nabaletha le submission lokwenta ukuthi nemsebenzi wa regulator ukuthi apply kule analyze lama views la khamngako sekubanga loqondzene nalesihloko sebuketa inzengo yagesi kungabe mhlawumbe ukuthi umuntu ubude nje ema issues la ngahlangana nalesicelo so kuyasinika lelithemba lokuthi lama views labathi batawasenda batawaletha after lama sessions lawo ngilatawube asinika i direction ukuthi itsini info esive
abe manje ngama stakeholder consultative meetings kusukela ke bafaka ke lesicelo on the 1st of November ungasichazela nje ukuthi sihambe phi sikuphi inyalo and when are we likely to see an announcement of the tariff award as per the request ye utility provider?
Ngibonge Mr. Perez umlawuli usitholile isicelo angashaya imhla ka1 loku kunyetwa ngumthetho ukuthi mazingena mhla ka1 thina kumele siqale sisebenze 1 November and sifike ngesikhathi ke nalesi le kufike ke sibe siniketwa isikhathi sangathi nyathi inzathu ubuketa nje lesicelo siphume nesijubo sesizamile ukukhulumisa ama customer tinzawo netehlukene kwekuqala lesi sibukile sibuke nje tinzawo lapho khona live noma ke kule magumbi la 4 elive lapho khona bantu bonke bangakhona ukufika ngibekise emadolobha lapho khona temabhasi noma imoto tikhona kufika tibalethe nalabete imoto angakhona ukugibela ibhasi afike so loke lesiyasikwende siyayithi sishintshe lendzawo lesikhathi lesibheka la lesikhathi lesibheka kuze ukuthi at least bonke labantu bakhona kwathi ukuthi kwendekani ngendzaba tekulawula kwagesi and bangastakala kuphi ngendzaba lephathelene nagesi sesibakhulumisile ke ngehlukohlukana siyile bo speak saya bo steki saya kalavumisa lasacala khona esikamanzini evikini eliphelile lokho silana aerial villas lamhla dawuthi ngimgcibelo sidabe senhlangano solo sikhulumisa yona indzaba ngilasagcina khona ke kodwa ke njengoba ngishilo ukuthi imivo solo ivulelekile ukuthi bani bayilethe imivo yabo ukuze kuyosha mhla ka 10 January dawuthi ke mhla ka 1 February latest kufanele sibe sikhipha sijubo ukuthi nasibuka lesicelo lesi sibuka simo selive sibuka imivo yesive ema customer yini lesingaphuma nawo ukubeka embili sinike ke ama customer isikhathi ezinganyati imbili ukuthi mhla ka 1 April iyaqala iyasebenza le price etabe seyi announce
kulabo labangafisa kuthumela via email no later than the 10th of January ithinde yomininingwane
uyasenda ku email yaka Esera ithi info@esera.org.sz siyakhona ukuyitfola leyo mivo loma ke leyo mivo liqhamuka ema customerni sichubeke sicwaninge leyo lephethelene nebemagesi siyendlulisele kubo bayisebenzena nabo ngoba le mikhona ethi yafika ayiphethelene nalesicelo sodwa iphethelene nje nalamanye ama issues ngedemagesi siyakhona kuyendlulisela kubo ke lephethelene nalesicelo siyikhulumise sianalyze siqhubeke sagesi besinqomo
ngambole sibonga kakhulu banathi
siyabonga Mr. Perez sibonge babukele emakhaya
maswatha ke sesifike ke maphethelweni nayo ke indzaba lebesikhathi siyisebenza lo muhlala indzaba ke kulawulwa ke kwagesi njengoba ke bosomabhizinisi bekade bahlangane ke naye ke isika kanye nemlawuli Eswatini Regulatory Authority sethemba nje ukuthi amaswati mangabe kumbe ayikhanze iseyisekhathi lenzaba kangena ku page lethu ka YouTube @Eswatini TV atfole ke ukuthi kuqale phi bakhulume ke bathini njengoba ke indzaba yagesi ithinza wonke umuntu maswati amahle sibonane ke ngalokudako siphilile ilanga lenu liqhubeke libe kahle nitsale kahle
you know, a comprehensive capacity building exercise